Hey everyone, welcome back to episode 2 of our simple inventory system in Unreal Engine. In the previous episode, we set up a basic UI, created item pickups, and integrated that into our game. If you haven't watched that episode yet, I highly recommend checking it out first because we'll be building off of that system. Today, we're going to take our inventory system to the next level by updating the UI to show counts for duplicate items, using maps to track our inventory and count, and allowing users to consume those items that will affect their player stats in the game. Before we get started, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to stay updated with all the latest content in this series and others. So let's go ahead and get started. To begin with, I'm going to play through this to show you where we left off, remind you where we left off. As you collect items, we have this popping up once you collect an item, and you'll see the item in here. You can click it, but nothing happens yet, so we'll take care of that. And as you collect items, you see them show up, populate this inventory list here. The issue is, one of the issues is when you select similar items, need to change that um, collision box on that one, you'll see duplicates of the item rather than adding a number next to this to keep track of it. So that's another thing that we're going to create in this tutorial. We're going to fix that to where this only shows one instance, but a number beside it to keep track. To begin with, we're going to open up our third person blueprint or the character that you put your code in. And is what we're going to do, we're going to change this inventory system. This is where we're handling our inventory system. And we actually want this to go from being just an array of these S items, this item structure, and we're going to turn this into a map. You'll see that we actually can't turn this into a map yet. And the reason for this is kind of complicated, but we actually can work around this if we go into um, our item structure. And this is what's stopping us from being able to use this as a map. If we actually turn this into name, which we probably should have used to begin with, and save that down, we can go back into our third person character and we can actually turn this into a map, which is what we want to do. Now you'll see if we actually try to run this, we're going to have all kinds of issues, blueprint compile errors, and this is because we're having to restructure pretty much everything we did to get this to work the way we want it to, which is okay. It won't be too complicated, but can get a little hectic. So bear with me, and I'll try to go slow enough so people can keep up. To start with, our blueprints for our items are going to have the wrong reference now. This will be a relatively easy fix here. However, we're no longer going to add items in this way anymore. So we can actually remove this and remove the reference there. We actually will no longer need to get our character information since we're not using that inventory system that way anymore. So what we want to do is we want to get the item data from the item that we interact with, and we actually want to uh, go through the interface to pick up the item and send the information here so that we can use it. So let's open up our inventory interface, and I'm actually going to add a function, and let's name this pick up item. And in pickup item, we want to add an input. And this input, I'm just going to name item. And it's going to be a reference to that item structure, S item. For now, we can compile and save that. Inside of our third person character, this is where we're going to handle that pickup item. So if we double click, we'll actually get a reference to that. And this pickup item is going to lead to where we're going to update our count. So I'm going to add a function here, and I'm going to name this update inventory count. And update inventory count is going to have an input. This will also be that item, and it'll reference our S item. I know this is going to kind of seem like it's all over the place since we're restructuring, but if you follow through, it's definitely going to be worth it. And there's going to be a lot of ways that you can customize and use this in your game. So kind of bear with me here. So what we want to do inside of the update inventory count is we want to grab a reference of our inventory, which is now a map, and come off of this, and we're going to say find. We're going to find this item inside of our inventory map if it exists. So get a branch off of your true false here. So if it exists, then we're going to add a number to that key inside of our map. So off of this, which is going to represent the amount of that item that is in our map, we're going to say plus. We're going to do a +1 because we're just going to increment it by 1. And then off of our item, we're going to say add, and we want to add a map to the map. And if this is true, we're going to add 1 to the map. And if this is false, we're going to come and do the same, add a map. Let's grab a reference to our map again. We need to plug this one into a reference of our map, so we'll do that. And so if this is false, if it doesn't find that in the inventory, then we're just going to add 1 total. It's just going to now be 1. And for now, that's going to be good in here. This will increase our inventory count as we pick up items. So we can go back to our event graph and let's call that function and connect your item here. So this item will pass into our update inventory count function and calculate that. Let's go back into our pickup item and let's fill in this missing piece. In here, we can use this player character and let's say pickup item, and we want the message. So it'll use that interface. And once we do that, we're no longer going to update the UI this way. So we can remove that. And we still want to destroy the actor. Let me make sure I didn't forget anything. Here's the rest of our on collision. If you forgot or need to verify what yours looks like. And I'll leave this on for a second. Feel free to pause it if you feel like we're kind of getting out of control here. Okay, so the next thing that we want to do, let's actually test this and make sure we have our items are now corrected. When you update your item, make sure you update the parent if you made children, and we're still able to remove our items like we were supposed to. So far, so good. The next thing, let's actually go into our inventory item widget and let's change this so we can start to display more than just the text. Let's go ahead. I'm going to copy and paste that text block. And I'm going to rename this second one something like count, maybe. And I'm going to select both of these, highlight them both. I'm going to right click and go down to wrap with horizontal box. This will put them side by side. And I'm actually going to pad these a little bit just to space them out. And I'm only going to pad the left and right with something like 20. And I want to do that to both of them. And once we get this to display, we'll be able to check to make sure this is working. With your count highlighted, we're going to come over to the text block and we're going to bind this. We're going to create a binding for this. And inside this binding, we're going to go ahead and add a variable. And I'm going to call this count. Um, let's rename this because I want to use the word count here. So I'm going to rename this to maybe count text. And go back to that function. And your count text function is now going to have a count text. But let's create a new variable. Just name it count. And this is going to be an integer. And we're just going to plug that directly into here for now. And this will get updated in our inventory widget whenever it's creating these inventory items. So that's good right here for now. This will, see, I think this will take care of itself. We might come back to this and ensure that it's working correctly once we actually set this value. The other thing that we need to do is go over to your get item text. This is the one that was for our name. And we're going to change this to a name variable rather than text since we updated the item structure. So all I did there was came over here and changed this to a name, and then I had to put the correct node hooked up here. The next thing that we're going to have to do is also going to get a little complex in here, but this is where we're going to add the items or get rid of the items once we click a button. So if you go ahead and let's actually focus on our item widget first before we work on the button. Let's make sure that this new text block is working. So let's open up our inventory widget. Inside here, just jump over to your graph. You see we have a few things to fix in here. So we're still getting a reference to our player character. We're getting that third person character information out. Instead of using the inventory like we were, it's now this map. So break link here so you can get access to this. Oh, sorry. So if you drag off of your inventory map, we actually have to get the keys from this. So do keys, and then we can do the for each loop. This will do a loop through all the keys. Let's go ahead and give ourselves some room here. Clean this up a little bit. So out of our, for each key that exists, we're going to create that inventory item widget. This is what's limiting it down to just the single reference to those items. And instead of setting the name directly, we're actually going to set the item itself. So if we go back to our inventory item in the graph, we want to create a new variable here. And I want to call this item and reference the S item. Then we can go back to our inventory widget for now. And inside of your inventory widget, let's do away with this. We're not going to set the name like this anymore. And if you come out of your inventory item widget, you can say set item. This is that variable we just created, and connect that up. The next thing we want to do, once we set that item, this is going to be this element here. So let's go ahead and connect that. I'll move this over the top so it's easier to see. And we're actually going to use this to get the name instead of the way I did it before. So jump back over to the inventory item. And if you go to get item text, this is where we're getting that name. We want to remove this. We'll no longer need that. Pull your item out, say get item. And if you right click on the pin, you can split struct. And then we're going to get item name right there. This item's being set in your inventory widget. So when everything comes through, this will have the correct name in it. And we're no longer using this variable, so you can get rid of it if you want. I'm going to leave it because we never know what we're going to do in the future. So back over to your inventory widget. Once we set this item, that'll go in and set the name. After we set the name, we want to be able to set the count. So if we pull off of our create item widget, we can say set count, and we'll put this behind our set item. And the way we're going to get this count is from our inventory map. We want to come over here and we want to say find. And once we pull off this array element, this is our item that we're going to use to find inside of our map. So if this item exists in our map, then this integer coming off that will be the number of items that match this item description. So we can plug this directly into count, and that'll set our count inside of our inventory item. When this comes here, it jumps into your inventory item into the get count text. It sets this count variable, which outputs into your actual text blocks. Final things to do in here is just connect this up. We're still going to add that list item to our the panel widget, but we need to connect this to our inventory item. Once again, I'm going to scroll through this one so you can see where we're at in case you're following along and want to pause it and update and kind of to make sure I didn't miss anything. So just taking a minute to look through. And this should be good. So go ahead and compile and save that. So the next thing, let's actually go ahead and test and see if this is working like we want it to. Nope. So it knows we picked up an item, but nothing is updating. We picked up multiple items. Let's go see what's going on here. Let's start in our pickup item. Just do a quick check. We're grabbing that item. We're going into pickup item, which is going to this player's blueprint or interface. Do update item or pickup item rather. And in here, that item information is coming to update inventory count. So this is likely where the problem is, and it is the problem. The first problem, I see two problems. I didn't connect this count into the add, so it was adding 0 if it was true and existing, so that's why we weren't getting an update. And if it doesn't exist, I'm actually not referencing the item here, so I need to reference that item, so plug that in there. Silly mistake, hope you caught that on your own, and then we'll go and play this and see what happens. So now it says item parent, which is our the name of our first item here. We see cube 1, item parent. Now there's 2 of those. Cube 2, odd cube. There's 2 odd cubes. This will make 3 odd cubes. So that's working. Real quick, while I'm thinking about it, I'm going to go and fix the, sorry, not in this one. I want to do it in the parent. I'm going to fix that collision box. It's not, or the collision sphere. It's not big enough for some of these bigger items, and really it doesn't matter. We just want to interact with it. So you would really set this for each of your items for consistency. So let's just make sure that's a little more consistent. So now we have 2 odd cubes, which is this mannequin mesh or material win. We have no blue cubes, but if we pick one up, we got a cube. So that's working correctly now. The next thing if you notice, we can pick items up, but nothing happens if we click that button. And we actually want to be able to click those and get rid of them. So to start with, now that we have our items in our inventory, populating in our inventory correctly, let's go ahead and let's start with, if we go to our inventory interface, I'm going to add another function in here, and I'm going to call this consume item. And consume item is going to have an input again. It's going to be that S item type, that item structure. And I'm just going to name this item again, compile and save that. So if we jump over to our third person character, we now have access to that function. We want to double click that to add it. And inside of here, we're going to create, just to handle this easier, I'm going to create another function here. So let's do a function. just to make this not as messy. And I'm going to call this item consumption. Inside of item consumption is where we're going to update our player stats based on our item data. So I'm going to come off of here. And again, just to make things a little neater, I'm going to use a sequence. And if you remember, inside of our item structure, we have name, image, HP, magic, and strength. The only things that we need for our function are going to be HP, magic, and strength, because those will be adding to our player's stats. So we go back to our third person character. In here, I want to create a kind of our stat system for our character. He's going to have a health to begin with. And this is just going to be a single integer. He's also going to have magic and strength. And for this item consumption, this we need to add an input. So go over to your details, click on your item consumption input node, and add an input. And this is going to be item. Make sure it's that S item or your item structure reference. And I'm going to go ahead and split this struct so we can get our HP, magic, and strength. And from here, I'm going to pull out each of these and I want to say set. So health set, magic set, and strength set. And each of these, we're going to set these. And what these are going to get set to is going to be the items HP that it's going to add to our player. So we're going to say add. And we're going to, for the first one, we're setting health. So I'm going to get the player's current health. And we're going to set that there. So it's going to be his current health plus the item's health attribute. And that's his new health. And we're going to do the same thing for magic. So just do an add, connect this up, and connect magic. And then finally the same thing for strength. Connect those and strength. This is kind of ugly in here, but I'll zoom out so you can see it. The next thing we actually want to do in here, just so we can watch if this is working, is I'm going to do a print string for each of these. And then every time we use an item, we'll be able to watch this work. In the next episode, we'll actually create a HUD so we can see these things in the HUD update like you would in a normal video game. So this is our consume or item consumption function. If we go back into our event graph where we need to call this, we're going to call it here. And I'm going to say item consumption, and I'm going to plug my item into here. So for now, that's going to work. We need to actually call this whenever we click our button. So let's go ahead. Behind here, I'm going to do another print string, and I'm going to type in consumed here. So once we get this set up, we'll know it works once this updates, but just kind of like to see consumed pop in there. You don't have to do it. It's kind of good in case something in here fails, which I don't think it will. But if you can see that, then you know that's one of these that aren't printing would be the issue rather than this. The next thing we want to do is go into our inventory item. And this is where we're going to handle that on click event. So if you click your button, which let me remind you is this whole um, section here, it's wrapping our canvas and all of our text and everything. So this whole thing's the button. If you click that button and scroll to the bottom, you get this on clicked, and we want to add that. To begin with, we need to get a reference to our character. So I want to say get player character, and then we're going to do that exchange information, which we created in the previous video so that we can get all of our um, third person characters or whichever character you set this up in's information. From here, I'm going to call that consume item. And again, you want the one that says message. And we can pull our item out of these variables, which is being set inside of our inventory widget right here. This is where that item reference is getting called, and we can use that here. It's being updated. A couple things that we still need to do here. If we pull out our inventory with a get inventory, we want this map. Here we need to find the item that we're consuming. So do find and plug that item into here as well. Again, this item is the item that we click on. So we want to find this. And a couple things we want to do here is the first one, if this exists, we're going to subtract 1. And we want to subtract just 1. But we're going to, off the subtract 1, we're actually going to do an add. And make sure you get that add map. We need to plug in our inventory reference here. And we can get that right here. We actually also need to do our item here, and then we can plug that in. I didn't like that. So if you pull off of this and then do an add, that will be better. Then plug in your -1 here. And let's connect that up. So once we click it, we're going to do a subtract 1 on that map, which will remove 1 reference from it. The other thing we want to do is we're checking that if this exists, that it's not equal to 0. Come off of this and do a branch. And if this is equal to 0, we want to say remove from parent, and we're just going to reference itself because we're going to remove this inventory item from the parent, the inventory widget. And then we want to remove this item from our map completely. So pull your item out. We need to get a reference to our inventory item and say remove. Sorry, our inventory map. Let me clean this up so that easier to follow. And be sure to connect your item here. So if we find the item, we're going to subtract 1. Then we're going to check if this now equals 0. And if it does, then we're going to remove it from the parent. And then we're going to remove it from the map so it no longer is in our inventory. If this doesn't exist, then we're going to call that update UI. And to do that, we need to get a reference to our character again. So come off your character and say update UI. Again, do the message. And let me clean this up a little bit. And that'll be our false. I'm going to go through this logic again once so you can catch up if you were following along, and also just to talk you through it. So we're getting a reference to our player, getting all of his information so that we can access his inventory. This item reference is coming from the inventory widget. It's going to be the item on an individual list whenever it's clicked, since we're doing the on clicked here. If we consume that, we're running that item information to the consumed. We're then looking through our map for that item. If it exists, then we're going to subtract 1 from it. If we subtract 1 from it and it now equals 0, it's going to remove that from our widget so we no longer see that button. And then it's going to remove it from our inventory so that we no longer can find it. And if not, we're just going to go ahead and update the UI. And let's go make sure our update UI is how we want it. It's in our third person character. I'm going to go update UI. And right now, updating UI will remove the inventory widget and then reopen it. And that's just so we don't get those windows adding on top of each other. So let's go see what that looks like. We're getting 1, 2, 3. If we click 1, it subtracts. And if you see, these are all going up by 50 odd cubes. So 150, so that looks like it's working. And once it hit 0, it removed from here. And we've added all of this to our player stats. Let's go ahead and if you go into your player character, let's give this some defaults to be a little more realistic. We'll say 100 for health, 25 for magic, and 5 for strength. Compile and save that. And then we also, each of these items, if you click one, then we can change the name. Let's call this blue cube for the blue one. And say this adds 20, 5, and 1. So now our blue cubes will add that. For our odd cubes, over in your details panel, if it opens up like this, same thing. We can give this some different numbers here. And that should be good for those. And we still have the parent one. Doesn't really matter, just to kind of see us use and consume these. We'll start grabbing them. If I grab and use an odd cube and then go pick up an odd cube, it added one back. If I click the blue cube, it goes away. Our stats are updating over here. And if I get it, it adds it back. Can't click it if it's gone. And you see our stats increasing correctly. So that's going to do it for episode 2 of our simple inventory system series. The things we've accomplished so far in this episode were updating the UI to show item counts, using maps to effectively manage our inventory system, and we enabled the player to consume items that impact their in game stats. If you've learned anything new in this episode and enjoyed it, please make sure to hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. In the next episode, we'll continue to enhance our inventory system by improving the UI and functionality. We'll display item textures, types, and descriptions, and we'll update the HUD to display and show our players' health, magic, and other stats. As always, happy developing, and I'll see you in the next one.